Artyom Levshunov, Sam Rinzel, Oliver Moore, and Nick Lardis. It's going to be a fun weekend in Minnesota.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and give me a follow on X at Jack Bushman 2, but make sure to check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. On today's episode, I'll break down all the notables on the Blackhawks roster for the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, plus when the kids are going to be in action this weekend in St. Paul. And then in segment 3, I'll also get into a quick update on a pair of Blackhawks prospects who are currently playing overseas. But first, I do got to let you all know real quick that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. The NFL season is finally here. We got Bears versus Vikings tonight on Monday Night Football, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer, because right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. All right, Blackhawks fans, hockey season, we're starting to creep towards it. We got the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase here this weekend, which usually marks the start of things picking up. News is starting to get going here a little bit in these last couple of days, although we're still waiting for Wyatt Kaiser to sign his contract as a restricted free agent. But before I do get into all the notables in segment 1 today on the Blackhawks Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase roster, I first got to get into a little bit of an update on yours truly here. As some of you may have already seen based on my post on social media, I did tease this on the last couple of episodes I've posted here recently, but I have accepted the role of Blackhawks beat writer for Chicago hockey now, which I could not be more excited about. I could not be more fortunate to have this opportunity covering the Blackhawks day in and day out. And I just wanted to say here real quick, well, first of all, let you all know about this change. I'm still going to be doing Locked On Blackhawks here on a daily basis. But obviously, if you want to check out Blackhawks written content, you can go and see my stuff over at Chicago Hockey Now. Make sure to go and give them a follow, like the Facebook page as well, if you can all do that for me. And then also, I just wanted to let you all know as well that this wouldn't have been possible without each and every one of you out there who have been along with me during this journey over the last handful of years. It all just started as a kid with a dream who really fell in love with the Blackhawks during the Dynasty era, which that alone I was fortunate enough to grow up through and, you know, make some really great lifelong friendships along the way, watching Blackhawks hockey day in and day out all throughout the summers. And to think that this is now where it's led me, I seriously could not be more grateful for that. So thank you to everyone out there who's, you know, if you've helped me, if you've, you know, shown support, if you've even just liked one single YouTube video, I really do appreciate each and every one of you out there, because it legitimately wouldn't be possible for me to go on this next endeavor in my life without all of you out there. But enough of that good stuff. We got enough Blackhawks content to get into here today. That's going to take up most of the show. As I referenced off the jump, we got the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase this weekend, baby. The Blackhawks are taking part in the showcase once again here, going up against the prospects for the Minnesota Wild and the St. Louis Blues. Tournament's going to be played in downtown St. Paul this year. As far as the Blackhawks schedule goes, they'll be opening things up on Saturday night at 6 p.m. Central Time against the St. Louis Blues prospects, and their second game of action will be the following day, Sunday, September 14th, with a 3 p.m. Central Time puck drop taking on the Minnesota Wild's prospects. For the Minnesota side of things, couple of notables. Both Minnesota and St. Louis, by the way, went about releasing their roster in a much swifter fashion than the Blackhawks did. They both were ahead of the curve and released their rosters last week. Zeev Buium and Daniil Yurov, who Of course, Seth Topal from Locked On Wild. We just did a show not all that long ago, and he specifically talked about Yurov. They're leading the way for the Minnesota Wild. Dalibor Dvorsky is back for the St. Louis Blues, along with Otto Stenberg and a couple of other high-level prospects as well. But let me tell you something, Blackhawks fans. This roster that the Hawks are bringing to St. Paul this year is absolutely fuego. Last year, it was cool to see Frank Nazar in action. We got AJ Spellacy with some good performances. Nolan Allen, Ethan Del Mastro, Artyom Levshunov were all on the back end, but this roster for the Blackhawks is absolutely loaded, and I think it also goes to show you just, again, how deep this Blackhawks prospect pool is, because these are prospects, NCAA prospects, and guys who are playing overseas professionally. They're not taking part in this showcase for the Blackhawks. So for this to be as deep and as high end of a roster that the Blackhawks are bringing to the table here, again, I think just speaks volumes about the position they're in long term with the amount of young talent that they have in their pipeline. But getting into the notables here, of course, Artyom Levshunov is back once again, second overall pick from the 2024 NHL draft, came right out of Michigan State and took the leap to professional hockey last year. Spent like the first 3 quarters of the season developing with the Rockford Ice Hogs, and then got to see him play in 18 NHL games with the Blackhawks, tallying 6 assists. I've already projected the Blackhawks defensive pairings on opening night here on the channel earlier this summer. And I know obviously things can and probably will change when training camp opens up here in 8 days time, I want to say. But I really do think Artyom Levshunov is going to be on the opening night roster. He does have to, he has to have a strong showing in training camp, but I fully expect him to. And just also with the size that he has to go on top of it, I think that makes it a little bit easier of a transition for a guy like him compared to, undersized guys who we've seen struggle like Kevin Korchinski or Wyatt Kaiser, who need a little bit more seasoning before becoming full-time NHLers. I don't necessarily think that has to happen for Artyom Levshunov. Now, he probably would still benefit from more time down in Rockford, but with the Blackhawks only having Connor Murphy and Louis Crevier on the right-hand side going into training camp, that tells me they're going to give Levshunov all the opportunities in the world to make that team, and I fully expect him to. And I expect this next guy to make the Blackhawks NHL roster out of training camp as well. Sam Rinzel is going to be taking part in the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, and my oh my, was it fun watching Rinzel play in his first 9 NHL games with the Blackhawks after leaving Minnesota following his sophomore season. And what we saw from Rinzel last year, I know there were definitely some bumps in the road, and defensively, there were some confusions and some breakdowns from time to time. But altogether, what we saw from him, I think, is just the raw upside that's always made him such an intriguing prospect. 6'4", 6'5", can skate like an absolute deer, and just always seems to be in the right positions, or seems to be aiding in creating something offensively. I know he didn't score his first NHL goal in those 9 games, but he had a ton of opportunities to do so, and I really do think there's a good chance that he's the power play quarterback of the future. Even though there's a lot of candidates here in Chicago for that position, I just think Sam Rinzel, with his skating ability and offensive instincts, and he's got a decent shot from the blue line as well, I really do think that's kind of his position of the future. And for the same reasons as Levshunov, considering how the Blackhawks have built their blue line going into this year, I really expect both he and Rinzel to make this NHL roster out of camp. But it all starts with a good performance this weekend in St. Paul at the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. But how about that back end for the Blackhawks that they're showing up with, Artyom Levshunov and Sam Rinzel on the right-hand side? And oh yeah, the Hawks are also bringing Rinzel's teammate from the last couple of years at Minnesota, and Oliver Moore, who fittingly made the leap to pro hockey along with Rinzel after their sophomore seasons closed. Moore played in 9 NHL games with the Blackhawks at the end of last season as well, tallying 4 assists, mostly playing in a third-line role. I don't know if it's going to be quite as easy or open for Oliver Moore to make the opening night roster out of training camp, just considering the numbers that the Blackhawks have, and, Dickinson, Mikheyev, Foligno, they got Slaggert and Doc, guys who are just a little bit more experienced, right? I'm not ruling it out, but I do think Oliver Moore has a tougher path to to make the NHL roster out of camp than Sam Rinzel and Artyom Levshunov, just because there's more competition in the Blackhawks forward groups and not a whole lot of spots available to open up the regular season. But definitely excited to see Oliver Moore wheeling and dealing out there in St. Paul, just like Sam Rinzel is going to be doing. Another very interesting prospect that the Blackhawks are bringing along as well that I mentioned right off the jump is Nick Lardis, who is such an intriguing wild card prospect in this pipeline, because if this kid hits, if this kid is able to translate his abilities from the OHL to the NHL, the upside is truly incredible. 70 goal scorer in the OHL last year, of course, with the Brantford Bulldogs, 71 goals in 65 games. First 70 goal scorer in that league since John Tavares in 2006-2007. Tough that Lardis' season, ended in a brutal way. He got injured in the OHL postseason, and Brantford was one of the top teams in the entire league. But now he's back fully healthy. I believe he had a conversation like a month ago with Scott Powers of The Athletic that I brought up here on the podcast, and saying, he does still have to put on a little bit more weight, but is starting to feel comfortable, had been skating again. So doesn't seem like there's going to be any real restrictions or anything on Nick Lardis. And also just fortunate that we seem to have dodged a bullet and he didn't suffer any sort of serious injury there for Brantford in the postseason. But definitely excited to see not only how Lardis is going to fare this weekend at the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, but just in general, how he is going to look in training camp and preseason action against grown men as he's now making the jump to this level. Very fascinating prospect in the Blackhawks forward group. On top of those four prospects that I've already mentioned, the Blackhawks are also bringing Ryan Green to Minnesota, played in 2 NHL games with the Blackhawks after closing out his junior year at Boston University, where he was a very solid and effective two-way player for that program, back-to-back Frozen Four berths, I believe. And he had 30 points in all 3 of his seasons there with the Terriers, was a co-captain for the squad this past season as well. So love to see him, returning to that team and taking on a leadership role. And kind of like Oliver Moore, I don't think it's going to be an easy path for Ryan Green to make the NHL roster out of camp, but definitely someone who's knocking on the door and at some point this year is going to be given NHL opportunities. Merrick Van Acker, first round pick in 2024. I mean, high-end prospects galore that the Blackhawks are bringing along with them. Obviously wasn't, like an ideal season last year for Van Acker. He had off-season shoulder surgery that cut his year down to only 45 games, tallied only 42 points in that stretch. But I do really think he's going to have a bounce back and monster season in the OHL, where he's expected to return to the Bulldogs along with 2025 top 10 selection Jake O'Brien of the Seattle Kraken. So that's going to be one of the most dynamic duos in the entire league, and that should give Van Acker some good confidence, I believe, heading into professional hockey, where he'll be signing he already signed his entry-level deal with the Blackhawks, of course, but we'll be making that leap full-time to Chicago after coming out of the OHL. And then one other notable I wanted to bring up here before diving on into segment 2, Blackhawks fans, is AJ Spellacy, who, of course, turned some heads during the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase last year and kind of snowballed that momentum over all throughout training camp in the preseason, wound up sticking around a lot longer than I think anyone anticipated. Unfortunately, it's NHL or back to the OHL for Spellacy, unless we get a rules change implemented for the 25-26 season about 19-year-olds. If that winds up happening, things may change for maybe Spellacy or Van Acker. I don't know if that's really going to get implemented so immediately before the start of the season, but more than likely heading back to the Windsor Spitfires once again. But yeah, just with his speed, at his size and his athleticism and physicality, just a guy who buzzes all around the ice and has the capability to make plays in lots of different ways. And Kyle Davidson definitely loves stockpiling those guys in the prospect pool. So AJ Spellacy, definitely another one to keep an eye on here this weekend when the Blackhawks hit the ice for the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, marking the start of hockey season. Again, they're going to be taking on the St. Louis Blues on Saturday, the Minnesota Wild's prospects on Sunday. I'm not done talking about the Blackhawks Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase roster, though, Hawks fans, because even though I've gone through a handful of notables here already, there's some other guys that I definitely got to mention here on the show. So make sure to stick with me when I return here for segment 2. But first, I do got to talk to you all real quick about one of today's sponsors, which is FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure the NFL season is here, I should say. And FanDuel is making sure you're ready for every single game with a can't miss offer. Because right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And what I personally love about FanDuel is that it's super quick, easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays with player props, same game parlays, and more ways than ever to now get in on the action. You're not going to want to miss out. So, are you ready to play? All you got to do is download the FanDuel app or visit FanDuel.com today to go and get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com to go and place your first $5 bet and to win $300 worth of bonus bets when it wins. Real quick before I get into segment 2, I have an important request for all of you out there. Locked On wants to hear more from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and to make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and to also answer questions about our advertising. Go to LockedOnPodcast.com/survey in order to get started, and everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's LockedOnPodcast.com/survey, or you can also easily find the link to that down in today's show's notes. And again, thank you all out there for helping us all out. Segment 2 on today's episode, picking up where I left off. There's still a lot of quality players that I haven't talked about that are a part of this Blackhawks Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase roster here. So definitely want to mention them before getting into segment 3. Nathan Bem is the first one I wanted to bring up. 2025 third-round selection for the Blackhawks out of the Kamloops Blazers in the WHL. Forward with some good size and offensive abilities. 6'2", 192 pounds. Got off to a crazy start in the WHL last year, but kind of cooled off as the season progressed. Still wound up being over a point per game. 66 points, 31 goals, and 35 assists in 59 contests last year. And I love just his confidence and how offensive-minded he thinks when we heard him talking following the Blackhawks selecting him in the third round this year. So definitely interested to see what Nathan Bem has to offer before potentially a really productive season as he returns to the Kamloops Blazers. Also wanted to bring up Martin Misiak, who was a second-round pick for the Blackhawks not all that long ago, back in 2023. Has been, all right in junior hockey with the Erie Otters the last couple of years. Had 59 points, 23 goals, 36 assists in 60 games last year while kind of jumbling around the top 9 for the team. Did go on to have an incredible run in the OHL postseason before I believe he suffered an injury as well. But Misiak is now making the leap to professional hockey, very likely going to be opening up the season with the Rockford Ice Hogs. But even though I don't think he has the highest offensive ceiling, I don't think the playmaking is necessarily there or really even the goal scoring. He has decent goal scoring touch and a decent shot, but I really do think he'd be more so utilized as a defensive minded center who's got some good size to him as well. So very interested to see how he's going to develop now that he's hitting the professional scene. But taking part in the Prospect Showcase this weekend, Jack Pridham, who I'm sure some of you may know is a prospect I have a little bit of a soft spot for in the Blackhawks pipelines. I just, whenever I see him play and watch his highlights for, being 6'1", the way that he moves around out there, I like his offensive makeup. I think he can be a decent goal scorer and playmaker. Obviously, I don't think he has like the highest ceiling in the organization, or I don't think he's going to be like a top liner or even really a second liner for the Blackhawks, but I feel like he can be the hidden gem of this prospect pool potentially. Every time I watch him, his game seems super intriguing to me. But 54 points last year, 27 goals, 27 assists with the Kitchener Rangers, where he will be going back to them this year. Originally, he was going to be playing his freshman year of college hockey with Boston University, but ultimately, I think just really liked the spot that he was at with Kitchener and knows he's going to be getting top line opportunities, and that'll probably lead to him making that jump to professional level. Whereas, signing with BU, considering how deep they are talent wise, just as a program, right? wouldn't have been guaranteed a whole lot of ice time, whereas here with Kitchener, he knows what role he's going to be having right out of the gate. So I think there's, pros and cons to both sides there, but should be a really good year for Jack Pridham. I'm expecting, at least with the Kitchener Rangers. Excited to see him in action this weekend. Aiden Thompson, one of the most productive players in college hockey last year, will be on the roster for the Blackhawks as well. Actually really played well too in the Calder Cup playoffs after joining on with the Ice Hogs. Had 4 points, 2 goals, and 2 assists in 7 games of Calder Cup playoff action. Like Martin Misiak probably is going to be opening up the year with the Rockford Ice Hogs, but someone who I don't think we should forget about as Blackhawks fans. He's got some good wheels and some good skill to his game as well, and plays a responsible game defensively, or at least he did for a couple of years with Denver. Tage Harding, if you think like Louis Crevier's a forgotten man on the back end for the Blackhawks, Tage Harding really feels like the true forgotten man here. Third-round pick for the Blackhawks back in 2021. Spent the past 4 seasons playing college hockey with Providence. Actually played in 8 AHL regular season games after closing out his senior season in college as well, and wound up tallying 3 assists, performed better offensively than I expected, at least right off the cuff. He's going to be opening up the year with the Ice Hogs as well, but excited to see what he has in store, and just another massive defenseman on the back end for the Blackhawks. As Tage Harding is 6'7". We'll see how that translates to the AHL level here this year. Parker Holmes, 2025 selection for the Blackhawks, 4th round pick this past year, had 1 goal and no assists in 21 games for the Brantford Bulldogs this past season. More so known for his fighting though, but because he is part of the 2025 draft class, did want to bring up his name. Ashton Coombe is another member of the 2025 draft class who's going to be in the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase. 6'5", left-handed defenseman who turned 20 back in July, heading back to the WHL to play with the Seattle Thunderbirds once again. Just a rugged, big defenseman that the Blackhawks continue to stockpile on their back end. And then in goal, how about Stanislav Berezhnoi? After we saw Drew Commesso lead the way in goal for the Blackhawks in this showcase last year, it's going to be Stanislav Berezhnoi utilized as their number 1, signed on with the Blackhawks here this summer after 2 very solid seasons in Russia's VHL. Had a 2.49 goals against and a .931 save percentage this past season. And the year prior, it was a 2.51 goals against and a .926 save percentage. So 2 real consistent seasons back to back in the middle tier professional league over there in Russia, or the middle tier of their development system over there in Russia. 1 step ahead of the MHL, 1 step below of the KHL. So really curious to see how Stanislav Berezhnoi is going to look. Only 22 years old, now with the Rockford Ice Hogs, going to be used as Drew Comesso's backup if I had to guess. So we're going to see him be leaned on as the number 1, I think, opening things up for the Blackhawks in this prospect showcase. And then I do also wanted to be sure to mention, in case you're, tuning into the game or something and you hear a couple of names that you don't necessarily recognize, well, that's because there are 5 non-NHL roster invites for the Blackhawks in this prospect showcase. Ryan Gagne has played with the Rockford Ice Hogs. He's going to be here. Harrison Israels is someone I'm admittedly not familiar for, but got a roster spot here for the Blackhawks in the prospect showcase. Owen Robinson is going to be part of the forward group as well. Jeremy Bouchelet is someone I have brought up on the podcast before because he was a right-handed depth add that the Ice Hogs added this summer, and they really do not have a lot of right-handed defensemen in the pipelines. If Rinzel and Levshunov wind up making the NHL roster like I expect. And then Owen Flores, I've also brought up on the show this summer as well. He's going to be serving as the backup, the number 2 for the Blackhawks in goal behind Stanislav Berezhnoi. But there is basically everyone of note that is taking part in the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase this weekend in Minnesota. Can't wait for our first little taste of Blackhawks hockey to return on Saturday night, taking on the St. Louis Blues prospects. Coming up in just a minute, Hawks fans, before I close out the show, still want to get into an update on 2 noteworthy Blackhawks prospects that are currently playing overseas. Segment 3, before I wrap things up, did want to get into some updates on Blackhawks prospects Roman Kantserov and Anton Frondell, who I know I've kind of been talking about a lot here recently, considering I've been going over a lot of top 75 25 lists, top 100, top U23 players lists on the show, but also because their seasons are starting or already have started in the case of Roman Kantserov. The KHL regular season opened up over the weekend, and Magnitogorsk began the season with a 4-3 shootout win over Akbars. Roman Kantserov, as he was doing all throughout the KHL preseason, served as Metallurg's top line center to open up the year. And obviously, I've talked on the show about how he's mostly been utilized on the wing in the KHL up to this point in his career. I do think just with his skating ability and dynamic, offensive makeup, I do think, trying him out at center does make sense. It's almost like kind of similar in a way to Lucas Reichel being moved to center in his last year over in the DEL. However, I don't know if it necessarily went all the best for Roman Kantserov because he was held without a point in that season opener for Metallurg. I believe he won only 4 of his 13 faceoffs. And then in their very next game that they actually already played here today because of the time change, over in Russia, Kantserov was back playing wing on the top line for Metallurg. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Is he going to go back to the wing full time? Is he going to be bouncing in between those two positions? Just something to keep an eye on in his likely final season over in the KHL before jumping over to North America. But no points through 2 games for Roman Kantserov. Not necessarily the start that I was hoping him to get off to, but obviously a very small sample size, so nothing to freak out about at this point or anything. And then Anton Frondell. Djurgårdens is, closing out their preseason. The SHL regular season opens up this Saturday. We'll see Anton Frondell in regular season SHL competition for the first time. And in their most recent preseason game, Frondell was playing left wing on the third line along with his good buddy Victor Eklund. And he's kind of been bounced in between that second and third line here through these last couple of weeks, playing both the center and wing. So kind of like Roman Kantserov, I'm really interested to see what is specifically going to be the role for Frondell moving forward. I know he's going to be in the top 9. I know they're going to use him in offensive-minded situations, but is it going to be at the center? Is it going to be at the wing spot? Is it going to be on the second, or is it going to be on the third line? If I had to guess right here, right now, from how Djurgårdens has mostly utilized him in the preseason, I'm guessing it's a third line for Frondell to open things up, but could be a really fun spot in that lineup because I think Victor Eklund could possibly be on that line as well, and those two are just going to cause havoc with their 200-foot game in the SHL, so should be a lot of fun to watch, but definitely wanted to bring up those 2 updates here on the show before closing things out. Roman Kantserov in the KHL already 2 games into the 2025-26 season, while Anton Frondell and Djurgårdens kick things off in the SHL here this weekend on Saturday. So a big weekend for Blackhawks prospects, that's for sure. That's going to close out today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Follow Locked On Blackhawks for free as well. And make sure to go and check out Chicago Hockey Now for all of my Blackhawks written content that I'm going to be producing on a daily basis also. Follow me on Twitter at Jack Bushman too. Check out at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. A lot of stuff going on, Blackhawks fans, but could not be more excited that hockey season is right around the corner. I'll see you on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.